I just got back from an unforgettable trip to Japan, and while the food, culture, and insights were amazing, what really surprised me was how this camera, the brand new OM-3, completely reignited my love for travel photography. I wasn't expecting it, but after using it every day for a month, I can confidently say that this little camera has changed the way that I shoot. Let me show you why. First off, a bit of context. OM System is the new name for what used to be Olympus. My very first digital camera was actually an Olympus, and it was my favorite waterproof point and shoot. But this is my first time ever using a camera from OM System, and the OM-3 itself is actually quite new. It just launched in February 2025. Now for transparency, OM System loaned me this camera for my trip, but they're not paying me, and they will not be seeing this video before it goes live. So everything I say here is my honest, unfiltered opinion after using the OM-3 every single day for 30 days. Now right out of the box, I thought that this was a really beautiful camera. I love its vintage retro aesthetic paired with modern touches, like the 3-inch articulating LCD display, the touchscreen controls, and a clean, easy to navigate menu system. Honestly, I think this is the most intuitive camera menu that I've ever used. I especially love how easy it is to add a feature to your custom menu, just by hitting the record button, and boom, it's there. By the way, I'll be posting a separate video with a full walkthrough of my custom settings for this camera, because I don't see a whole lot of those out there, and I do think that you do need to do a bit of customization to this camera to get the most out of using it. Now beyond its looks, I was also very impressed by how compact and lightweight the camera and the lenses are. I actually had two lenses on this trip, a 35mm and 50mm equivalents, but I ended up sticking with the 35mm for 99% of the time. One thing I've noticed so far while shooting with this camera is that, they gave us two lenses. There's a 35mm equivalent as well as a 50mm equivalent. And typically I like shooting with a 50mm, but even though I have it with me, I've actually had the 35 equivalent on this camera like the entire time. And it's making me realize that I think I like 50 when I'm shooting, events, when I'm focusing on people, but for travel, I'm definitely understanding why 35 is the preferred focal length. The setup was so small that I could just keep it slung over my shoulder all day long without any hassle. The camera and the lenses are also splash proof, and I definitely put those to the test because we had several full days of rain in Japan, and the OM-3 handled them like a champ. No issues with capturing photos in wet conditions. Now the OM-3 features a 20.4 megapixel stack sensor, and it shoots both RAW and JPEG photos. I mostly shot in JPEG because I thought the camera's color science looked really great out of the box. Up front, there's also a front dial that gives you access to customizable color filters. And while I did play around with them for a bit, I mostly stuck with the eye enhance profile. I thought it looked great in pretty much all the situations that I was shooting in. But one standout feature for me was the computational modes. These let you take high-resolution tripod shots, HDR photos, or apply built-in neutral density and graduated ND filter effects. I use the GND filters a lot for dramatic skies and landscape shots. Normally you would need physical filters for this, but having those built into the camera was a total game changer. Now switching from photo to video is also very easy thanks to the top dial. You can shoot it up to 4K 60 frames per second normal speed video, or slow motion at up to 240 frames per second in HD. And there's also 5-axis in-body stabilization that works surprisingly well. I shot pretty much all of my footage handheld. The autofocus performance also really surprised me, in a good way. There are a lot of options, and you can set the camera to prioritize humans, animals, birds, cars, motorcycles, or airplanes. I kept it on human detection most of the time, and it locked onto my kids, who never stopped moving, very quickly and reliably. Whenever I needed to manually choose my focus point, it was very easy to use the directional buttons, though I will say a little bit more about this later on in the critiques part of the video. Now, another pleasant surprise for me was the battery life. I only had one battery with me for the whole trip, which at first made me a little nervous. But even with 100 to 200 shots a day, I never went below 75% battery life by the end of the day. I did power the camera off when it wasn't in use, but still, it had really impressive battery life. Now, earlier I mentioned that this camera made me fall back in love with travel photography. What I meant by that is, for the past few years, I've actually stopped bringing dedicated cameras on vacation besides my action cameras. My iPhone has been my dedicated camera for taking my still shots and my B-roll shots. And that was my initial plan for this trip as well, until OM System reached out literally a week before I left, and they offered to loan me this camera. So the timing was so coincidental that I figured I might as well give it a shot. Well, I ended up using this camera every single day, and I customized my settings to my style, and I ended up shooting around 3,000 photos over the span of a month. And honestly, I loved the experience of using this camera. It reminds me of why I love to document travel with a real camera instead of a phone, and I thought it produced really gorgeous results that a phone can't quite get. That being said, there are a few things that I would love to see improved on this camera. First of all is the sensor. This is a Micro Four Thirds camera, which in comparison to crop sensor cameras and full frame cameras, both of which is what I normally use whenever I am using a dedicated camera, this sensor is quite a bit smaller, and that brings some trade-offs, especially in low light. Now, I admit that I didn't run into many issues in Japan, mostly because the neon lit streets of Tokyo are basically built-in light sources. But in my usual low-light shooting environments, like in conference rooms or restaurants or dim event spaces, I could see this camera really struggling at higher ISOs, like beyond 4,000. Most of my other critiques have to do with the physical build of the camera. I wish that it had a more pronounced hand grip. Right now there basically is none. And I would also love to see 2 memory card slots. A lot of people like to use dual slots for backup, but I like to use the second as overflow, so that when one card is full, I can just switch over to the other, and that way I have double the amount of storage inside of my camera. On that note, it would be amazing if there was even a small amount of internal storage, just in case you totally run out of card space. Last thing, I would love to have a joystick for selecting my focus points, rather than the current directional button layout. I just find it a lot faster and easier. But the biggest potential deal breaker is the price. The OM-3 body alone is $2,000 US, which currently is the same price as my full-frame Sony a7 IV. That's a steep ask for a Micro Four Thirds camera, even if the lenses are more affordable at around $500 to $550 each. But that's my experience of shooting 3,000 photos over 30 days in Japan with the OM-3. If you found this video helpful, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more travel gear reviews like this, then please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and I also linked a video down below where I go through my custom OM-3 settings if you're curious about how I set it up. I'll see you in the next video. We are Susie, Martin, Julian, and Leo, a family from Seattle traveling to Japan for a 25-day vacation, if you can call it that.
Most people would not even consider doing something like this with a 9-month-old and an almost 4-year-old.
It's our first overseas trip as a family of 4, and we've got lots of adventures ahead, including stops at Mount Fuji, Tokyo, Kamakura, Ito, and Atami. But first, we need to endure the 10.5-hour direct flight from Seattle to Tokyo. Are we ready for this?
No.